So before our final session, we're going to once again gather ourselves with music. This is one of those simple and repetitive songs in which we can throw out some different words. And we'll take a pause and listen for words if anyone wants to offer one. If not, I wrote a list of words that you all have been contributing up here to the Soul Speech collage. So we can use some of these words too, because I think they've all been popping up for us in our discussions. So the song is called Love, Take a Walk With Me. It goes like this. Love, take a walk with me. Love, take a walk with me. Love, take a walk with me. Oh, Spirit, guide my feet. That's the whole thing. So can we sing that together? Ready? Love, take a walk with me. This is the high line. Love, take a walk with me. Same as the first. Love, take a walk with me. Oh, Spirit, guide my feet. Let's try with calm. Calm was a word. Calm, take a walk with me. Calm, take a walk with me. Calm, take a walk with me. Oh, Spirit, guide my feet. What's another word that's speaking to you today? Wisdom. Wisdom, take a walk with me. Wisdom, take a walk with me. Wisdom, take a walk with me. Oh, Spirit, guide my feet. Another word. We had slow was one of the words someone put up here. Slow. Slow, take a walk with me. Slow, take a walk with me. Slow, take a walk with me. Oh, Spirit, guide my feet. One more word. Friends. How about that? Friends, take a walk with me. Friends, take a walk with me. Friends, take a walk with me. Oh, Spirit, guide my feet. Oh, Spirit, one more time. Oh, Spirit, guide my feet. Amen.
I'm going to do something a little different to open this last session. Take a deep breath. That'll be the same. I'm going to share a poem with you. And this is a poem by Denise Levertov. And Allison, it was so interesting that you mentioned the word but in this poetry. The very first line of this poem begins with the word but. So I'm going to read the poem twice, and I'll give you a little invitation at the beginning of each reading, ways to listen to it, ways to engage it. And we just sang, Spirit, guide my feet. Let's assume that there is spirit in these words, soul in these words. let's assume that that spirit is going to talk to your spirit. That soul is going to talk to your soul. Now, I'm going to alert you, since I'm reading it to you, I want to alert you to a few things. First, the first line is, "But we have only begun." The very first line, which raises the question, what is this poem responding to? What might have been said to elicit that response? And then there's some repeated phrases that I want to alert you to. "We have only begun" is one of them. Not yet is one of them. And another one is, let me make sure I'm going to say this correctly. "So much is in the bud," like the bud of a flower or the bud of a leaf. All right, you might want to take a deep breath and settle back. Relax your body. You can close your eyes and listen if you would like to, or maybe you focus on something and soften your gaze, whatever you're most comfortable doing. And this first time through, just notice how your body responds to it. Notice any emotion that rises up. Notice if anything causes your soul to sort of sit up and take notice. But we have only begun to love the earth. We have only begun to imagine the fullness of life. How could we tire of hope? So much is in the bud. How can desire fail? We have only begun to imagine justice and mercy. Only begun to envision how it might be to live as siblings with the beast and flower, not as oppressors. Surely our river cannot already be hastening into the sea of non-being. Surely it cannot drag in the silt all that is innocent. Not yet. Not yet. There is too much broken that must be mended. Too much hurt we have done to each other that cannot yet be forgiven. We have only begun to know the power that is in us if we would join our solitudes in the communion of struggle. So much is unfolding that must complete its gesture. So much is in the bud. I'll read it a second time. This time, maybe listen for a word or a phrase or an image that seems to be asking for your attention, your reflection. And after I finish reading this second time, we're just going to sit in silence for a bit. In the silence, you might want to just relax. That's okay. Maybe you came up with a gesture earlier today to represent your intention. So maybe periodically in the silence, you want to make that gesture. Maybe there's a word up here that has stood out to you today, and that could be your breath prayer in the silence. Or maybe you have your journals and your pens out and you want to just start writing, responding to what you experience in this poem. So I'll read again. We'll pause in silence. But we have only begun to love the earth. We have only begun to imagine the fullness of life. How could we tire of hope? So much is in the bud. How can desire fail? We have only begun to imagine justice and mercy, only begun to envision how it might be to live as siblings with the beast and flower, not as oppressors. Surely our river cannot already be hastening into the sea of non-being. Surely it cannot drag in the silt all that is innocent. Not yet. Not yet. There is too much broken that must be mended. Too much hurt we have done to each other that cannot yet be forgiven. We have only begun to know the power that is in us if we would join our solitudes in the communion of struggle. So much is unfolding that must complete its gesture. So much is in the bud. Let's hold a bit of silence together. Amen. Take just a few minutes, just seated right where you are this time. Turn to some people around you and share a little bit about what you heard in that poem, what you felt, what you heard, what stood out to you, what you experienced, maybe your guess as to what statement that poem might have been responding to. So just turn to people next to you and share a little bit. If you want to hear anything again, let me know if you forgot a line.
if you could begin to wrap up your conversations. Thank you, Adam. So for those of you who do not know me, I am the Reverend Mary Carson. I am the rector is my official title. I use the term pastor because everybody else understands that much better. Of St. James Episcopal Church, which is a couple of blocks down the street in some direction that I can't determine from inside here. But at the corner of Cheviot and Montana. And I was asked if I would speak for a few minutes about Westside Churches United, which for those of you who are here in the neighborhood, you may have at least, I hope, heard of it. You may not understand what it is, but for those who are from beyond Westwood and the West Side, this may be a completely new thing. And I want to tell you that this is a story of people and place, working into the themes of this conference. And this is a story that I suspect each one of us involved with it would tell in a very different way. But this is Mary Carson's version of Westside Churches United. As you can see, I've listed the congregations that are involved with this informal, collaborative form of ministry. And you can see the rather eclectic group of clergy involved in this picture, which was taken after our election eve prayer service last November. And as you can see, we are very eclectic in terms of age, the traditions that we come from, our backgrounds within those traditions, and that truly is the richness of what we are trying to do together. Again, as I said, we're an informal collaboration. I can't stand the thought actually of becoming anything more formal. That basically is a group of clergy and our congregations who, within the culture of the west side of Cincinnati, which is overwhelmingly German Roman Catholic, are representing congregations. As Rich says, we are one parish worshiping in different places, but we share a commitment to understanding God as a God of love and acceptance, and therefore are trying to nurture, create communities within our congregations that are places of love and acceptance and hospitality. And that's really all it takes to become a member of our motley crew. We have added some along the ways, but I want to say that the roots of what we have become partially go back to my neighbor's place, which is principally a ministry of Westside United Methodist Church, just a couple of blocks away, begun I think 16, 17 years ago. But from the very beginning, even though they've provided the space and much of the resources, has been an ecumenical venture among various neighborhood congregations. In all these pictures, there's no way that one picture can tell the full story, but it is a very diverse place with a variety of ministries and based in asset-based community development theories, as so many of the organizations around here are. But that ministry, I feel kind of like is a linchpin to our beginnings. I became involved 8.5 years ago when I first moved to the neighborhood, and others have joined in as well. One of the other sort of key players within the neighborhood, not quite as much involved, but is Cincinnati Urban Promise. Abe and Johnny Brandeberry started this many years ago in Northside. It moved up to Westwood about 9 years ago. Took over the nursing home down a few blocks, half a mile or so on Harrison. Totally renovated the place. I never imagined that would be possible, but they are amazing and have a ministry particularly with children and young people. And that sort of has become a neighborhood faith-based organization, again, asset-based community development centered, that has brought a number of us together in various ways in service with them. One of the first things that we began doing, and it actually began with just the Methodists and the Episcopalians before COVID, I want to say 6-7 years ago, was doing pub theology, which has just been a fun way to gather people together from our congregations and beyond, that we've settled on the third Sunday of the month, and it became an easy thing for others to join into. It obviously took a hiatus during COVID, but when we came back with Methodists and the Episcopalians, it wasn't long before Lutherans began to join us, and over the last year or so, we've realized, this is something we can all do together, and it's one of the great ways in which we all, the clergy leadership, have realized it is such a blessing, particularly for somebody like me who serves in a congregation by myself, to share the leadership of something so that it's coming up with a program or speaker every week, every month, isn't just on my shoulders, but we share that amongst all of us. So everybody is welcome. Third Sunday. We have a variety of different kinds of programs. This was from January when we had somebody from the Immigrant Dignity Coalition speaking to us. There's sort of two different areas in which we have focused our cooperative work. One has been in worship. You saw at the beginning the picture of all of us after our pre-election prayer service. We've done several prayer services. One shortly after the beginning of the Israel-Gaza war. We did a Martin Luther King service back in January that Dr. Clark spoke at. We've also now for several years done a version of the Stations of the Cross outdoors on Good Friday afternoon around Town Hall. It's not Town Hall Square because it's a triangle, but a way to provide a public witness to the neighborhood and people who are around here. And again, being able to do it together. We've recognized that what we do, we are stronger together than we are by ourselves, and that there are lots of things that we can do together that, particularly for my small congregation, we would not be able to do on our own. It just wouldn't be viable, wouldn't be productive. We've also taken on some projects over time. One last summer that came out of one of our monthly coffee conversations in January of 2024 was let's have a conference. Okay, sure, we can do that. So last July we did with the first Westside Imagination Conference. You might recognize, I didn't include the picture of Becky. Becky was a principal in that, Dr. Clark also. And it was amazing. We had 70, 80 people over the course of a day and a half gathered at the Methodist Church, exploring a variety of topics related to both contemplation as well as action in the world. Who knows if we'll do it again, but it was a great way to bring us together. And that's our commitment, that we do together what makes sense for us to do together. And we support one another in individual things going on in our own congregations. We, for a couple of years now, have done Advent and Lenten flyers that show what's happening in our individual congregations with the invitation that anybody can join us for anything that we are doing, wherever it might be happening. And the last picture actually become incredibly appropriate today. So we've not done huge amounts of activism kind of things, but we've done a bit. So there is a sort of adjunct member of our group who belongs to a Roman Catholic church, but very engaged in social justice, who has become sort of part of our group, and who, right after the inauguration, said, we need to do something for immigrants. I'm like, okay, what are we going to do? So he suggested a Sunday afternoon gathering outside of St. James, which we had done 5 years ago, sort of on our own in the midst of the aftermath of George Floyd's murder. But we did that, and it's a very appropriate way to end. Well, I know this gathering has been focused on deepening our soul connections. There are times when what's going on in the world interrupts, and we can't just focus on that. So I just want to offer an invitation. I found out at lunchtime that ICE, or ICE-adjacent people, showed up in Price Hill, which is adjacent to Westwood, this morning in the parking lot of the grocery store. And so good old Kevin has already been on it, and people will be gathering tomorrow afternoon at 2 p.m. at the Kroger on Warsaw, that you are welcome to come to if you would like to show support. This isn't heavy-duty activism. This is just saying these are our neighbors that we want to say, we see you, we care about you, and we want you to be safe. So consider that your invitation. And with that, I probably have gone on too long already. So we'll leave it at that, but please watch for information. We do have a Facebook page for Westside Churches United. You can watch that as well as on our individual congregational Facebook pages and other places. So, thank you.
Thank you, Pastor Carson. And next, you're going to hear the words of Dr. Adam Clark. So let's welcome him on up. And pray the technology works. Oh, you want to do that one? Okay. You might have to come up here.
Testing. Oh, okay. Put that in your pocket. Thank you. Thank you. Hold on, let me. Okay. Yeah, it does. It does. Well, welcome. I know this has been a long conference. And when I saw Mary present, where is she at? Did she just? Oh. I was like, I didn't know I was part of all this. Like, I'm looking at it, I'm like, yeah, I spoke at the pub. Yeah, I was at the Imagination. Like, that was the first time I understood the whole thing. So that was helpful for me as well. A couple things. One is... Sure. Is this good? Okay. Oh, thank you. Hold it close? Okay, I will. You keep it. If I lower it, let me know. Two things, and I'm looking at the time, so I have way more information I can present today. So I'm going to kind of hopscotch through these slides, a lot of information. Usually people ask me for my slides afterwards, and I'm able to do it, but this time I can't because I'm trying to do a publication with this information. So I'll go slow enough for you to take pictures or to write it down, but I can't actually give it to you, at least not yet. But this is, when I was asked to present on the prophetic imagination, I went to the person who wrote the book, Walter Brueggemann. He's the one who popularized the term prophetic imagination. So this is really a distillation of his work in a way that I hope you find digestible, usable, and able to apply to your everyday context. So with that being said, and I usually assume that people know nothing about the Bible or nothing about the prophetic tradition and that type of thing before I present, because I'm used to presenting to audiences who are either who are not really steeped in the biblical tradition. I work at a Catholic school. So I don't make assumptions, and I teach first-year classes too. But first, what is a prophet? Prophets are messengers from God. This is and I'm using a biblical kind of standard, bringing the world of the spirit and our physical world together. They apply God's vision to the present, challenging the status quo. So when you think of a biblical prophet, we think of someone, and they're more about, some people, when they talk about prophets, they're thinking more about fortune tellers who tell the future. But that's not necessarily the biblical notion of prophets. Prophets are like mediums. They're trying to usher in an alternative reality, right? When you think of Amos, when you think of Jeremiah, when you think of Isaiah, we're talking about the Hebrew and biblical prophets. That's more in line with the prophetic tradition than the kind of popular culture idea that the prophetic is some type of, reading your personal future together. So the way Brueggemann sets up this his understanding of the Hebrew Bible, he talks about two traditions in contrast with each other. And this is a bit overly simplistic, but it works in terms of understanding the tension in the text. One is the priestly tradition, and the other is the prophetic tradition. Okay? Priestly and prophetic. And he's thinking about the Hebrew Bible versus, or what you would call the Old Testament, versus the New Testament or the Christian Bible. The priestly tradition, he claims, seeks to domesticate God. What I mean domesticate means to locate God exclusively either in the temple, in liturgy, in creeds. So it's fixed, it's located, it's static, right? Versus the prophetic tradition, which is about that God's freedom is uncontainable. It's not exclusively located in the temple. It's not exclusively located in the creed or the liturgy or worship, right? And he gives an example of this by talking about 1 Kings 8, where they try to contain like the Ark of the Covenant into the temple, and that's the place where God resides. And he's like, yeah, but God is bigger than that, right? There's no one place where God resides. God resides everywhere. So the prophets give us an enlarged vision of who God is and what God does. Here's another kind of just chart talking about the difference between the contrast between the priestly tradition and the prophetic tradition. The priestly tradition domesticates God. The prophetic tradition declares God's dangerous freedom. The priestly tradition maintains the system and seeks order and control. The prophetic tradition disrupts the system and calls for justice and transformation. So these two are both in the biblical text, and they're in tension with each other, right? So when people talk about the Bible as the Word of God, it's probably more accurate to say the Bible contains the Word of God, because not everything in the Bible is liberative and emancipatory. There are oppressive ideologies in the Bible as well, right? Slaves be obedient to your masters, women stay silent in the church, there's all these type of things. So when we talk about what we find edifying and liberative and of God in the Bible, we're making a selective choice on what's authoritative about the biblical tradition. And Brueggemann wants to argue it's the prophetic dimension of it, right? So how did he come up with this? The idea of, he mentions how when he looked at all the Hebrew prophets, and he's an Old Testament Hebrew scholar, right? He says, prophets don't speak in prose, they speak in poetry. They use metaphor. They use parables and poetry and imaginative utterances. And they do this to think outside the box on what conventional social and economic life in ancient Israel actually is, right? So in order not to be policed by putting things in prose, they put things in metaphorical terms. Like Jesus spoke in parables, right? Every time they asked him, or he was silent. But the prophetic tradition is something that is always eliciting the imagination because it's dangerous to be a prophet. Most prophets are persecuted and die because they're telling something that's uncomfortable, that stings about the truth. Right? So when he started looking at this, he started saying that this is an imaginative act, looking at the prophets. Second thing he says that what prophets do, they imagine a world where where there's a living God. God is not static or fixed. And they're trying to imagine what the world would be like if God was truly in authority, right? He says the key idea of the Bible is that it's centered around this type of alternative imagination that's centered around God, right? So that human beings develop their systems and their social arrangements. And what's happening is that God is trying to usher in new possibilities all the time and is waiting for people to listen, as Becky wrote, listen and hear God's word and act, try to embody or re-envision the world as it should be, as it ought to be, not as it currently is. And these two acts involve, and there's two functions two tasks, I should say, that are associated with this. One is prophetic criticizing, which is criticizing unjust systems. And the second is prophetic energizing, right? So all prophets do two functions. They are criticizing the state of affairs, and they're energizing for hope. And probably the most dominant or most effective prophet in our modern world in the United States has been Martin Luther King Jr., right? Where he prophetically criticized racism, militarism, and economic exploitation, right? That's where he critiqued. And then he energized in terms of talking about beloved community, right? That's the possibility, which was his way of talking about God's kingdom, right? So there's two aspects, criticizing and energizing. Now, the models in which Brueggemann talks about biblically, first, everything for him is, the paradigmatic is the Mosaic response to Egyptian oppression, right? He spends most of his text dealing with that because that's foundational. And the memory of Moses is appealed to throughout the Hebrew Bible and even the Christian Testament, right? So that's foundational. I'll talk mostly about that. And then you have Jesus and Roman Empire. So you have Moses and Egyptian Empire, Jesus and Roman Empire, and then you have the American church in American Empire, right? So he wants to see a parallel between the two, between all of these periods, right? And say that if we look at the Mosaic tradition, we could get insights into what the church ought to be following. And we could get insights on how Jesus innovates on that tradition. And that should give direction to the contemporary American church, right? And he says the empire script is usually pretty similar. It has certain cultural inflection points, but it's a culture's dominant story. It's marked by anxiety, fear, scarcity, exploitation, accumulation, control, and violence, right? That's the script of empire. And what he wants to say is that with Moses and the covenant, which he's talking about he he calls it the Ten, I guess we more talk about the Ten Commandments, Mount Sinai. He says, those are new rules for neighborliness. So the term neighborliness he wants to use as an alternative to empire scripting. So that the empire calls us to individualism, to exploitation, and what God is calling us to are new forms of neighborliness, an economy of neighborliness, right? That's the model that he wants to use, right? So Egypt, he says, is not so much, he doesn't really debate whether it's a historical thing. He says Egypt is more of a metaphor. That's how it's best understood. It's a metaphor for empire wherever it is. And that Egypt is recreated in each generation in different ways. Whenever you see concentrated power in a few people, that's Egypt, right? Whenever you see the elites exploiting the poor, that's Egypt, right? So Egypt becomes a metaphor for predatory empire. So it's not so much a physical place, but a symbol of political and economic systems that dehumanize, right? And then he goes back to the kind of the original kind of root Exodus story to try to flesh this out, of Pharaoh's empire. So it's a narrative of security that comes from hoarding, slavery, and that human value is determined by productivity. And that what happens with Moses is that God calls a people out of Egypt to exit this predatory economy, to imagine a new way of relating in the wilderness, right? That challenges the social or the imperial culture of Egypt. And that's the general kind of big story that's happening here, right? So I'll get into, but Pharaoh is a top-down paradigm of injustice, right? So Pharaoh is a metaphor for all predatory economies. And I'll go through this very quickly, and if we have time, maybe I'll go back. But first you have slavery or exploitative labor, right? There was that Pharaoh treated the Hebrews harshly. Bricks without straw. Then you have debt control. Then you have no rest, right? No Sabbath was honored. Then it's enforced with violence. And it's totalizing too, meaning that the condition of Egypt is seen as all there is. There's nothing outside of that, right? Tina, there is no alternative, right? Now, I know some people in our contemporary moment think there's no alternative to our political thing. And this is kind of instructive now in this historical moment in the United States that people say there is no alternative. We have to just do things one way or you're going to be penalized. Well, there was a time when the people of God, right, under slavery said there is no alternative. There's one way, Pharaoh's way, the evil tyrant's way. And if you do not do this, you're going to get fired, you might be killed, you're going to get punished, and you're going to experience retribution. Right? So he reads this type of consciousness, this pharaonic consciousness, as royal consciousness, right? Which is a mindset that goes throughout the Bible. He says it's in Solomon, because the Hebrews get conquered not just by the Egyptians, but by the Assyrians, the Persians. Then they set up their own monarchies, or their own kingdoms, right? And you have prophets that come up and try to critique the royal consciousness within the Hebrew kingdoms of the Israelites, right? So he says, this goes back and forth throughout the entire Bible, where you have this tension between the royal consciousness and the prophetic consciousness that are battling each other throughout the biblical text. And he gives certain types of characteristics of what that royal consciousness is. It suppresses prophetic voices, discourages critical thinking, legitimizes injustice as normal or the divine will, stifles grief over oppressions, and hope for alternatives. What he wants to say is that it generally numbs people or makes people feel indifferent. I can't do anything. I'm powerless. Things are what they are, right? When you feel that way, you're feeling the script of empire acting on you, right? It's acting on your mindset that you're powerless. There's nothing you can do about it. So it numbs people through prosperity, nationalism, religion as ritual, and fear, so they stop imagining or pursuing a better world. That's the task of empire. A couple other things here that it goes, but I'll just hopscotch through this. So the big example is Egypt. He also talks about Solomon's reign, and he talks about basically Jerusalem's elite with Amos, Isaiah, and Micah, right? The leaders of Judea and Israel get critiqued for ignoring justice, for exploiting the poor, for using religion to mask injustice. So it's not just people who are external to the Hebrew story, it's even internal. And there's internal critique, robust internal critique. So what I want to focus on here is what he develops as a pharaonic response, right, to Pharaoh's economy. So mosaic response, excuse me. And he has this as a three-part drama of the Exodus story. One, Exodus, which is exiting the pharaonic empire. Two, wilderness, which he says that's where provision is provided. And this is the most scary part, right? When you know something's wrong and you're not sure how to land outside of that, right? Because as you remember the story, when Moses first took the slaves out of Egypt, they weren't like, oh, thank you, Moses, right? Thank you for saving me. They were terrified. They were fearful. What have you done to us? We want to go back. At least we have food and comfort, right? So sometimes a familiar misery is more comfortable than the unknown, right? This is where faith actually comes into action, right? When you're uncomfortable and you have to keep walking, you have to keep striving. So in the wilderness, there's abundance. There's manna from heaven. They're eating quail. There's no explanation of why this happened, but you see points along the way where things are looking dire, and then manna appears. Then a quail appears as meat. Then the water appears from a brick or a wood, right? All of these type of things where it talks about God's provision for people who are walking out on faith from an exploitative situation and landing, right? And wandering, right? So that's what he refers to as abundance. So first is exit, then wilderness, and then Sinai, which is the rules for neighborliness as he reads it, right? So exit, abundance, being fed, and then how should we arrange ourselves? We arrange ourselves through the Ten Commandments, which he reads as rules for neighborliness. And he wants to focus especially on the Sabbath, which is resistance to Pharaoh's production demands. I think it's an interesting way of thinking about Sabbath. That so many of us get caught up because we're measured by our productivity and our use value. But here, Sabbath is about human beings are intrinsically, there's something inalienable. Inalienable means that you can't take it away. There's an inalienable dignity about the human being, which means I don't care what you do, that you can't throw it away even if you tried. You can't criminalize it away. You can't do bad acts away, that there's something just intrinsic about this, right? And this is part of what the Sabbath reminds us of, that we are more than what we do. We are more than what we produce. And out of this rides what he calls God's counter economy. And this is what he's talking about, the Mosaic paradigm in terms of that. There's a counter economy or a counter community to the imperial economy of Pharaoh or of empire. Now he's getting to what the church is. The church is a counter-cultural institution that exists within empire, right? That's trying to talk about rules of neighborliness. That is how we enact life together. And here's some of the things he says. He says, first of all, the Bible arises out of this kind of exploitive economy, and it's sustained in a sustained critique of it. God's liberation of Israel through Moses is not just a political freedom, but economic and spiritual freedom. The Sinai covenant, the Sabbath, the debt release laws, and Jubilee are acts of resistance, right? They're not just spiritual acts. They resist the very imperial circumstances that the Hebrew people are under. And they call for a counter-scripting. Right? It's not just we're free to do what? We're free to enact a new mode of living as an example of what human life should look like. So that the prophets like Moses, like Isaiah, like Jeremiah offered a reimagined world, and they invite people to see life not as Pharaoh defines it, but as how Yahweh intended it. Right? And then he, this is going back a bit. Before the Exodus, he talks about how even in the context of oppression, slavery, a totalizing system, you have acts of interruption of that system. For example, they says there was an edict in Egypt to slay the firstborn, but yet having children was an act of defiance of that, right? That's an interruption of that system, right? The Israelites crying out, an act of defiance of the system, right? Like, so all of these little things he's talking about up here are acts of interruption. So before the big deliverance or exiting, he says, pay attention to little interruptions that happen, right? That kind of destabilize the systems and gives you a vision of what things are intended to be before they come into the fullness of what they are, right? So you don't have to wait passively. That God works through us to interrupt the logic of how things are going in imperial circumstances and ushers us to imagine a new way of relating. Here's nothing about Sabbath as resistance. Sabbath protest commodification, not determined by production. I'll just got to skip some of this. Economic justice. Yeah, Jubilee, Leviticus, all of these things. And what is so appreciative about this idea of prophetic imagination, it combines spirituality and materiality, right? A lot of times what happens is that people's Christianity comes almost exclusively from Paul and they read Paul because he's talking about spiritual things. But most of the biblical tradition combines the spiritual with the material. For example, Jubilee was a time when all debts were forgiven. Happened every 25 years, or 50 years actually. 25, 50, it kind of shifted. When slaves were set free, when land was given back to the original owner, right? This is actually a material concept that has a spiritual basis for it. So the prophetic imagination is not just shifting your heart posture, but transforming the circumstances that are external to you as well. So there are different types of scripts. The imperial code protects the elite, enforces inequality. God's code protects the vulnerable, resets the system. Liturgy. The liturgy of empire glorifies power, silences dissent. God's worship, Passover, is a memory of liberation, right? It's a memory of how the Hebrews were actually delivered from Egypt. Psalms of lament, the voice for the voiceless. The Eucharist is about abundance, not scarcity. And Sabbath is about the rhythm of resistance. So that these liturgies are protests, they're acts of defiance, not exclusively acts of celebration, right? If you understand it in the context of it's read against the imperial system. And finally, to really take it to Jesus in terms of the Roman Empire, right? So he goes from Moses and Egyptian Empire and then wants to read Jesus against the Roman Empire, right? So he reads Jesus as a figure who is confronting his prophetic, who's the embodiment, really, of the prophetic imagination. Because first, he's confronting the royal consciousness of Rome through the kingdom of God. What does he do? He subverts empire and critiques the legalistic religion of Judaism. How does he do this? He challenges Roman Empire by saying, well, it's kind of akin to what Pharaoh, this type of Roman imperial power. It's very akin to that. And then with the legalistic religious system, he said it colluded. It got co-opted by Rome. And he tries to talk about a new context of neighborliness, right? Where he welcomes the unclean, the tax collectors, the lepers, the sinners. He feeds the outcasts, relates to the marginalized. It calls for a radical detachment from wealth, power, and prestige, right? These small acts of defiance, right? This is a new mode of relating in terms of prophetic energizing, right? Prophetic criticizing the things as they are, and prophetic energizing to an alternative community. Let's see. I won't get into this is more details about this. Eventually he's crucified by the state. I'll just mention that. For disrupting the status quo. And his death reveals how deeply threatened empire is by a neighborly alternative. Right? So the good news of the gospel is that the totalizing regime is being interrupted. That's his reading. Right? So the prophetic imagination is an interruption. Right? It comes in and it's the imagined alternative of the things that exist as they are. It's what are we being called? What's our highest calling trying to do for us? Right? And how do we embody that, both in our personal lives and our collective lives? And this church is a counter community, right? That is called to prophetically criticize by unmasking injustice. Some injustice you might see very present. Some you might have to call out, give a new name to, reframe, right? It's rejecting the idea that there's no alternative, right? That's really key. It's a refusal to accept. Sometimes the prophetic is a refusal, a deep down refusal to consent to the things as they are. Right? That's a deep spiritual thing. There's a certain spirituality to consent. Because what empires want you to believe, they want to condition you psychologically to believe there is no other way. And this is the highest type of way in good. And what the prophets remind us is that we have to think, feel, exist outside of that framework. Right? So, with the criticizer, there's also an energizing. He quotes some type of he quotes Exodus to try to talk about what happened outside the economy. And the role of the church is trying to nurture this prophetic consciousness and live by a counterscript, right? People say the church is not the world, and it's not supposed to be the world. It's supposed to be an alternative community, a distinct alternative community. It should be the salt. And what happens when salt loses its saltiness, right? It just becomes useless. So what he's saying is that counterscript is the salt of the church, what it ought to be. So here are some of the implications for today. Many in the church live comfortably within Pharaoh's system, but God calls us out, away from empire, comfort, and control. That worship should summon a certain crisis of choice, right? Authentic worship should make us feel that we're making a choice between the dominant culture and the reign of God, right? When you feel worship, when you're listening to kind of words of contemplation, it lures you into a way of thinking, of seeing and feeling and trying to enact a new reign of God, and you see that in contrast to the culture as it stands. So letting go of entitlement, privilege, and standing in solidarity with the poor. See. Call to action. So part of what the prophetic imagination is really trying to get at, the two things that I want you to leave with, is prophetic criticizing and prophetic energizing, right? Naming injustice and imagining a new way of relating neighborly, right? So here are some reflection questions, because I'm a little over, I think, 20 minutes, but I know we're not going to get to this, but I just want to say this for your thinking. But where does Pharaoh's economy show up for us today? You know, that's one thing. We talk about the Pharaoh's economy of yesteryear, but where is Pharaoh's economy today? How might the church interrupt a Pharaoh-like system? What aspects of God's economy feel most radical today? Such as, can you do a jubilee, a debt cancellation, all of these things. How can our church model God's economic justice? What liturgies or worship practices might reinforce the status quo? What prophetic words, images, and actions give you hope today? Are we willing to surrender comfort or privilege for a counterculture? And what injustices need to be unmasked today? And last, what systems need interrupting in your context? What totalizing regimes persist? And how can the church cultivate a prophetic imagination to respond? And I'll end there.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Clark. Appreciate it. As we do our final small group conversation, want you to think about, what stuck out from what you just heard. And also, what's something that's happened over the course of today, if you were here last night, something that you're going to take with you, something that you're very thankful for, might be a new friendship, something that you heard, but what's something that you're going to take with you out of this place today? And I want to invite you, once you get that thing and share it with your friends, to write that thing down and put it up on the board as well, because we want to celebrate those things and be able to see them. So I invite all of you to do that towards the end of your small group. So, yeah. So you can go ahead and find a group, a small group, and you can chat a little bit, debrief, and and then we will conclude officially for the day. So sad. So, all right. Well, yes, of course. Yes. So you can go ahead and stand up, find some wonderful people to debrief with, and have a little chat.
All right, when you take a little bit of time to wrap up your conversation and have a seat. Every little thing is gonna be all right. Don't worry about a thing. Every little thing is gonna be all right. Woke up this morning, smiling sun, 3 little birds. Here we go. We're happening. Okay, Rich. Rich up on my doorstep.
Were you going to do a blessing at the end too?
I don't have to. It's fine. Music's good.
What do you want?
It's fine. No, that is absolutely fine. Absolutely fine.
All right. Oh, hey, how we doing? Well, so, we were just saying, as we're talking about wrapping up, it's fascinating to me, and I've got some things, some thank yous here in a minute, but we have been on a journey together the last 24 hours, haven't we? A pilgrimage, and we didn't really know how it's going to end. We may still not know how it's going to end, but it's an amazing. I think the word earlier, a mosaic, was used. Pilgrimage has been used. All these things, and I think about even this morning, it seems like we've been here for weeks, and yet it also seems like it was just 5 minutes ago when we opened up this morning. I think that's beautiful. It's actually Kairos time, or God's time. And I think when you experience that with other people, it's beautiful. And so thank you all for being here. So do you want me to open up? Is there 2 or 3 people that just want to share? Actually, before we do that, let me get a couple of things out here. One is, we were able to do this, and I have to say thank you to the Presbytery of Cincinnati. They gave us a significant grant for seed money to do a lot of the things that we're doing. Now, it didn't cover quite everything, and that's why I'm really glad that you said, hey, we have a donation box out there. So if you want to help cover some of the costs of food and everything, that'd be fantastic. Thank you. But we do want to say thank you to the Presbytery of Cincinnati. So some of you that know Lisa Allgood, when you see her, say thank you. Also, we have had an amazing, amazing design team. And so I'm going to ask them to come on up here now. So come on, friends. Amy, Mary Beth, Becky, Adam. And Noelle Shepard also, but she had to leave because she has a side gig as a photographer, and so she had a wedding this afternoon up in Dayton. And Noelle did so much too. I mean, the gift bags, the photographs. If you're on social media, go to Westwood First. You'll see amazing pictures of this weekend. So, and we want to be thinking of her while she's in Dayton and traveling. So, with that, and I'm going to ask the design team to share some things here in a minute. One of the things I want to make sure I'm getting out to everybody too is that we have some things that are going to be going on. So we're bringing this Soul Place gathering to closure. But there's, like we've talked about, we don't know what seeds have been planted. We're going to continue to grow other things. One of the things that I'll just share, like having Drew here, and having Allison here, and having Rolf here from Scotland, and also Adam and Mary and all the other folks, and Peter. We're building networks, co-creating together. Like I said at the beginning, 2 years of Zoom calls, and here we are, and we don't know what's going to come next. We're on a pilgrimage together, and so that's exciting. Having said that, we do know some things that are immediately happening next. One is that Allison is going to be preaching here tomorrow morning in the worship service, and so we'd love for you to come and be a part of that if you'd like. Oh, that's a great thing, 10:30 a.m. We don't want to take you away from any other place, so, but if you're looking for something, 10:30 a.m., Allison will be here, and Rolf's going to be doing the children's moment, so that's going to be fun. And maybe singing in the choir. Maybe. Also, Monday night, we're going to have an Iona informational meeting at W's at 6:30. That's right down here. If you want to come and be a part of that, that'll be a fun evening, and Rolf will be leading us in that. And also, Soundings of the Heart at our Westside Abbey on Tuesday at 6. Thank you. And Rolf will be leading that as well. So great opportunities even this week. So with that, our design team, as we've been setting, and they've done a great job of curating this experience. So are there 2 or 3 things that you would like to leave as a blessing to the folks here? So who wants to go first?
I would just say that it was very peaceful and calm. All of you that gathered, from the presenters to folks just checking it out, made what I did very peaceful. I wasn't stressed. I didn't have a lot of anxiety. I didn't feel like I was performing. I just felt like I was one of us. And so that felt good, and I'm going to take that with me and try to do that everywhere I go.
At events like this, gatherings like this, the things that always stand out to me, the things I remember are images, sounds, kind of the things that you were leading us in this morning, Rolf. And I will take with me the sound, the sort of hum of the conversations that were happening around me, the words that we all said, but also the spaces between the words were powerful to me. And when Peter last night talked about kind of looking in each other's eyes, and you led us in a song this morning, Rolf, where we were holding hands and singing to each other. So your eyes are something I'll take with me. And the hospitality that you all.
Hospitality, amazing.
Yeah, for sure.
May you enjoy a soul place where you get to experience the collaboration of beautiful souls working together, like I've experienced this weekend and with this community. May that place be a place where your belonging is not at jeopardy if you have a loving dissent that you can experience, and may you experience energizing of your community and be energized by them.
I have to be last, of course, so what am I going to say? I liked the way that everybody was willing to participate and talk with each other. Our role is hospitality and food. We hope that you were nourished, not just in your gut, but you were nourished by everything else that was happening here. So I'm not going to say any more, just that it was a blessing for us to do this, and we hope it was a blessing for you.
Awesome. All right, so we're going to open it up here. Is there 2 or 3 folks that would like to share some of, as they have been through this experience, what is something that you want to share with the group as a closing blessing of what you've experienced? So anybody? 2 or 3 sentences.
Just wanting to get to know and meet each and every one of you. And that's what was important to me.
Anybody else?
I guess what I experienced here was how people were so soulful. The depth of conversations almost immediately. I just appreciated so much. I think the space was set up well, and You all have just done a fantastic job. We couldn't clap long enough, I think, to thank you for the experience we've had here.
I have a question. Where will our imaginations lead us next?
That's a great question and a blessing. That's beautiful. Anybody else? All right.
I just want to thank everybody for creating such a safe and welcoming and fertile ground for us all to grow from.
Well, with that, yes, of course.
Yeah, I just want to extend an invitation to you. Often at the end of retreats and events like this, one of the questions might be, what are you going to take with you? Or what do you want to take up after this? But also maybe what do you want to release? That's for you to think about, but I'm going to invite you as you go, after we sing a bit of a blessing, there's a lot of things up here. Maybe you want to take one with you. Let it unfold. If somebody takes the word that you wanted, just write it on another card again and take it with you. So after we sing and after we close, please come up and take something with you that you want to take home. Stick it up on your mirror, stick it in a book so you'll see it and just see maybe how it unfolds in your life.
That's awesome. All right, this is the last very practical announcement. Okay, at 5:30, for those of you that can make it, we're going to regather for our post-gathering celebration at Westside Brewing Company. And so we'd love to have you there, as many of you that would like to come. That'll be a great time for us just to kind of breathe a little bit and enjoy each other's company and conversation. If you do buy a beer, just tell them you're with Westwood First, because it's actually a fundraiser as well. They're going to give us 20% of the beer sales. So just say you're with Westwood. That's the practical thing. They also have great pizza there with Catch a Fire Pizza. So just know that you're invited. We would love to see you at Westside Abbey at 5:30 soon. What did I say? Oh, yeah, Westside Brewing. We'd also like to see you at the Abbey, but definitely at Westside Brewery tonight. So with that, Rolf.
Do you want the stand in the mic?
Yes, please.
Just before the stand comes, one person that we've still to thank is our host. And there were many hosts, but there was one with the prophetic imagination to bring us all together, and that's you, Rich. And you can tell him personally what you appreciated about his way of doing this. I'll not embarrass him anymore publicly. Here's a little blessing. The words are very simple. May you find peace. May you find hope. May you find love this day. And if you want to take yourself back to Sunday school, sign for peace is this. The sign for hope is this, and the sign for love is crossing your hands across your chest. See how you go with that. Here's how it goes. May you find peace. May you find hope. May you find love this day. May you find peace. May you find hope. May you find love this day. Sing with me. May you find peace. May you find hope. May you find love this day. May you find peace. May you find hope. May you find love this day. In sunshine and in rain, in laughter and in pain. Join me. May you find peace. May you find hope. May you find love this day. may you find hope, may you find love this day. When troubles are all around, the one you seek shall be found. Look at each other. May you find peace, may you find hope, may you find love this day. May you find peace, may you find hope, may you find love this day. Sing to someone you struggle to bless. May you find peace, may you find hope, may you find love this day. May you find peace, may you find hope, may you find love this day. And now sing to yourself. May you find peace, may you find hope, may you find love this day. May you find peace, may you find hope, may you find love this day. Thank you. Be blessed. And if you're here tomorrow morning, you're my little choir, because this is my contribution to the children's address.